This is Metro Week. Our top story, the state of the city. Tucson's mayor gives his annual address on progress, prospects, and priorities.
An opportunity I've talked about before is annexation. Bringing back more of the tens of millions in state-shared revenue we lose each year by failing to annex or incorporate. The city of Tucson completed 7 annexations last year.
Our Journalists Roundtable analyzes the speech and other Tucson news of the week.
Welcome to Metro Week. I'm Andrea Kelly. This week, members of our Journalists Roundtable join me for the entire program. We'll see excerpts from Mayor Jonathan Rothschild's State of the City address and put some perspective on how he and the city are doing. Joining me in the studio are Becky Palak of the Arizona Daily Star, my colleague Christopher Conover of Arizona Public Media, and Dylan Smith of the Tucson Sentinel. Thank you all for coming in today. Now, the speech was much longer than our program, so we're only going to show excerpts, but I would like to start, Dylan, with a specific proposal that the mayor made about road taxes. So let's watch that clip first.
People are driving less and using transit more, and this trend predates the recession. Even before the streetcar launched, transit use in Tucson was up 24.5% from 2005 to 2010. In fact, Arizonans today drive fewer miles per person than they did in 1994. More reason to plan for additional transit when we go to reauthorize the RTA. Streetcar ridership and revenue continue to exceed expectations, and the streetcar's contribution to downtown redevelopment can hardly be overstated. The city resurfaced 241 lane miles at a cost of $11.7 million less than projected. Every dollar from the streets bond goes to pavement, so by the time we're done, we anticipate paving an additional 650 to 700 lane miles for a total of roughly 1,700 newly resurfaced lane miles in the city of Tucson. That is turning opportunity into results. In fiscal years 2015 and 2016, we pick up the pace. Not only are we under budget with the streets bond, we're ahead of schedule. This is a program I want to see renewed, so we buy ourselves another 5 years of road work without having to raise taxes. City crews are fixing potholes as fast as they can, as they're reported, with priority given to those on high-traffic, high-speed streets. But potholes come back, and the pavement and treatments we're able to do, thanks to the streets bond, fog seal to mill and overlay, preservation to restoration, are the correct, the long-term approach to fixing our streets.
Dylan, so the two proposals there are to extend the RTA, which is a half-cent sales tax to fund roads in the whole region, and also to extend the street bonds, which is a property tax for Tucson residents only. And the mayor frames those as no tax increase, but they would have to go back to voters to do that extension. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, I think it's fair to say that it's not a tax increase to continue things as they are, as in bumping things up. It would really depend, specifically on how it would be structured if we were to go back and vote again on the RTA. There's been a lot of talk about changing the mission of the RTA a little bit to make it also focus on road maintenance as well as road construction. And for the city bonds would really depend on what the bond market is at that moment, how much we could actually raise based on how much we would have to pay back for them.
In 2013, in his State of the City address, the mayor said that the city needs to focus on sustainable transit plans. And obviously, we just saw that clip. He starts with transit as a reason to reauthorize the Regional Transportation Authority. But the city's general fund subsidy to the transit system still remains a budget issue. It's something they're still grappling with this year, right?
Well, saying that transit is sustainable doesn't mean that you don't spend any money on it. It means that you are saving money that you may have otherwise spent on other things, on transportation oriented. If you have enough buses, if you have the streetcar, the idea is that you are taking cars off the street. You don't have to put as much into widening roads and keep repairing roads.
One of the interesting things is the statistic he cites about the increased use of public transit. Those years also cover when we saw a big increase in gas prices. And if you go back and look, we saw as the gas price went up, so did public transit use. And as it went down, it dropped off a little, though it did stay at a slightly higher level. So it's kind of an interesting argument that some of this could have been brought about by higher gas prices. But again, people did stay on the buses and now on the streetcar. We have a streetcar stop right outside our office, so I see it go by all the time, and there are people on it.
Transportation is one of the mayor's 5 T's. A year ago, he framed his speech as the Arizona economy has been based on the 5 C's. Tucson's economy needs to be the 5 T's, and transportation was one of them. Another one was tourism, and a big part of that is what's going on with downtown redevelopment. So let's hear what he said about that.
Not too many years ago, few saw opportunity in our downtown. How times have changed. Even Scarlett Johansson loves downtown Tucson. Johnny Gibson Downtown Market is under construction, with opening planned for the spring. After years of trying, we have not 1, but 2 downtown hotels in the works. A 7-story AC Hotel Marriott to be located on 5th Avenue between Broadway and Congress, and a 140-room hotel on the northeast corner of Euclid and 4th, with retail space and underground parking. A 3rd hotel, a Residence Inn Marriott, is planned for Tyndall and 2nd, all of them on the streetcar line. Having a central business district and GPLED incentive, a primary jobs incentive, a site-specific sales tax incentive, and other financial and assistance programs at the city. These are making it possible for the city to get the right development in the right place. We know it can be cheaper to develop vacant land, but we don't want sprawl. Sprawl hurts everyone. So we incentivize infill. And with the incentives the City of Tucson offers, everybody wins. Just last year, our primary jobs incentives helped create 456 new jobs. Those jobs pay, on average, more than $67,000.
Christopher, last year, the mayor said in a little more overt way that if we boost tourism to downtown Tucson and other parts of the city, people will realize that the city is good. They want to maybe move here. Bringing them here for a tourism trip might lead them to move here. He didn't say it as overtly this year. Are we seeing evidence that that goal that was stated a year ago is working?
We're seeing evidence of people downtown. Now, that's a long-term goal, I think, getting people to come and visit and then relocate here. You can't see that in a year. Even if you saw a bump up in the number of people downtown, which anecdotally we see, we've all talked about it, more people going downtown. There are bars, restaurants, things to do downtown, but it's only a year, so it's hard to say if this is just something new and whether it lasts or not. But also, you hear talk about people moving into downtown. Right now, really, the only new places to live downtown are student housing areas. And of course, they're only really full during the academic year. So again, long-term, short-term, 3 hotels going in, sure, that will help have people temporarily in downtown, but the long-term, we have to wait and see. There are really not a lot of studies on that yet because we're still in the very new short-term on this.
On the other hand, for a few years, we were hearing talk about big tourism events such as the Gem Show leaving town potentially. It hasn't, but spring training did leave. And we saw, just threats that more of that would happen. What is the city's role in tourism? What can a mayor or a city council do? Well,
we're not hearing about the Gem Show leaving anymore, and certainly keeping the city attractive. And I don't necessarily mean nice trees and things like that, but that certainly helps too.
Oh, and he mentioned trees in his speech too.
That's
not a clip we're going to play, but you can watch the whole speech on our website.
He did, actually. But giving people a reason to come here, the city can help attract big events like the GEM show. Obviously, it's not going anywhere. The city had some roles in trying to keep spring training here a couple of years ago, obviously unsuccessful now, helping to bring in the soccer tournaments and things like that. The city can help bring people in, and we did have spring training for Major League Soccer. We sort of have some spring training baseball. We have 4 teams from the Mexican leagues coming up. So the city can have some role in bringing people in, but it also takes, obviously, the private partnerships and things like that.
It's important for the city to take some of those steps because it helps solve the revenue side of the budget problem. So our bed tax revenue, for instance, hasn't recovered to the levels of before the recession, and so it's very important for them to try and jumpstart the tourism sector of our economy.
And Becky, tourism is one of the 5 T's. Another one is technology, and some of the industries that people might move here for if they're coming as a tourist and later coming for work include healthcare, solar, and the mayor also touched on aerospace and defense. So I want to specifically hear what he said about Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in that.
The city of Tucson is working with Pima County, the state of Arizona, our congressional delegation, the business community, and others to develop the best possible case for southern Arizona's military installations. Those installations play a vital role in our national defense and our regional economy. Aircraft maintenance, command and control, communications, electronics, engineering, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, pararescue, UAVs. Davis-Monthan hosts a wide variety of missions. And Tucson's airspace, flying weather, and location, our aerospace and defense sector, and our university all continue to make southern Arizona a strategic choice for both training and operations. We know the Department of Defense is consolidating infrastructure in Europe. Our goal is to position DM as a central operations base with the command and control, air support, and logistics to mount a comprehensive response to crises wherever they arise. A united approach will help us accomplish this goal.
Christopher, you cover the federal government for us here at Arizona Public Media, so that includes the commissions that crop up every few years about whether or which Air Force, Army, military bases and installations to close. When we talk about needing to preserve Davis-Monthan for economic reasons in Tucson, are we referencing a realistic threat or a political talking point? What's the reality here?
The reality is just in the past 7 days, the Air Force has taken 10% of the Davis-Monthan A-10 fleet, the main plane flown out of there, and put it in backup status. That means it has no support, no pilots, no ground crews directly supporting it. There are concerns that as the Air Force continues to try and retire the A-10, that Davis-Monthan could be in trouble. It's a real concern. The Air Force for 3 or 4 years has been trying to mothball the whole fleet, and that is the main plane flown out of Davis-Monthan. Now, the mayor talks about command and control. There is a center at Davis-Monthan. It's called a CAOC. It is a command and control center. It's one of, I believe, 5 in the world that the U.S. Air Force operates that can control an air war anywhere in the world. So that's important and is a feather for Davis-Monthan. But if the A-10 goes away, there's a problem. Former Congressman Ron Barber, in fighting to keep the A-10, was also trying to get the F-16s out of Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, where the new F-35 is going to be based, trying to get those F-16s moved to Davis-Monthan as the F-35 came into Luke, basically to replace the A-10 if and when, and it's really eventually going to be a when, it gets retired. That fight to keep the A-10 is still in Congress. Congresswoman McSally, Senator McCain, and others are very active in trying to keep that plane in the air as long as possible.
It's apparently inevitable that the A-10 is not going to be flying forever, but I don't think there's any risk of Davis-Monthan being shut down as a base. The boneyard is something that you could not reproduce anywhere else, and it's basically impossible to move all of those planes that are held in the boneyard.
They're not even functional.
Many of them are not functional.
Right.
Some of them are, being held there in storage, but there are just not that many good places to do that sort of thing. And that requires a really good functional runway. So if you have one, you may as well be using it, especially given our proximity to the Goldwater Range as well. So certainly the sorts of missions that will be at DM are going to shift and change, as they always have done. But I don't see it, being shut down as some other bases around the country have been completely closed.
Because of the KAOC and AMARG, the boneyard is more commonly known. And Dylan's right, you can't move those. And even if you could, how would you? If they could get all those planes airborne, I think it's the 4th largest air force in the world if you could get those planes airborne. The mission, though, could change, and we could see fewer people at the base, depending on what that mission is. And it's a huge economic driver here. It's one of the largest employers in the Tucson metro area. So if it goes away, or its mission is redone and shrunk significantly, that has a big economic impact that really, ripples out through the community.
We'll pause now for a quick break and a look at what's coming up on Arizona Week. We'll be right back with more.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Next on Arizona Week, Arizona's budget nearly finished, but does it come at a new cost?
The legislative cut is absolutely unreasonable on top of that and will damage the future of this state.
We're continuing with our Journalists Roundtable on the Tucson Mayor's State of the City speech. Becky, he said something about jobs that I thought was interesting, unusual maybe, which was a call for people to take on more interns, more businesses to take on interns. What did you think about that?
And he's got several programs to help people match job openings with young people in the community. It's important to him for a couple of reasons. One is he wants to help businesses stay in Tucson. It's retention that's important for economic development. So he wants to make sure there's a job pool of young people to fill these job openings for high-tech companies that are here. And he also wants to make sure young people stay in Tucson and contribute to the economy and have jobs available.
So that's a retention issue for the whole city.
Absolutely.
On another business and economics issue is trade with Mexico, and this has been something we've heard this mayor talk about every single year that he's been in office. This will be his 4th year in office, a big initiative for him. So let's hear what he's saying about what's coming up and what's been happening in the past.
We continue to advocate for improvements to SR 189. The 4-mile bypass route that connects I-19 and the expanded Mariposa Port of Entry. That project is now included in the Arizona Department of Transportation's current 5-year construction program. We're working with PAG and MAG, the Pima and Maricopa Association of Governments, to accelerate the project further. Tucson is a gateway to Mexico and the United States. Having the north-south transportation infrastructure to take advantage of that is a matter not just of local, but of state and national concern.
Becky, as he mentioned, it's not just a city issue, but what can the city actually do when we're talking about international, regional issues like this?
So I think the mayor thinks his role here is to bring partners together. He really needs state and federal partners to be paying attention to these issues. So he's going to be asking them to put this higher up on their to-do list. And these projects basically are on wish lists for funding for state and federal dollars. So he's going to make sure they don't slip out of sight, out of mind.
Dylan, that brings us to another issue that he talks about partnering on, and that is education, with literacy projects, volunteering in schools, and improving attendance and enrollment. Again, what is the city's role in these issues?
Well, that's not a function of the city. We have school districts that handle education, but the mayor believes that it's his job to use that bully pulpit, to use his position in the community to try and get more kids back in school. He's gone out door knocking with the superintendent of TUSD to go knock on the doors of kids who aren't showing up, who have dropped out, and try and convince them that, hey, you need to go back to school. And that's been something that's been a bit of an issue throughout Tucson, throughout all of our districts here, that the dropout rate has been rather unfortunate.
And he cited some specific numbers about how many students have gone back to school, and his experience is actually waking kids up to try and get them to go back to school those days. Again, the full speech is available on our website. But I do want to also touch on what he said about the importance of education funding.
We've submitted a proposal to bring AmeriCorps Vista members to Tucson to create community schools at participating sites where families can find social services as well as educational services. That's giving access to opportunity. Elected officials need to hear from the business community that fully funding K-12 education is not just a priority, but a necessity, a pro-business necessity. And I want to thank the Tucson Metro Chamber for sending a letter to Governor Ducey and legislative leadership urging increased funding for our public schools and their continued advocacy. That's the kind of business leadership we need.
Christopher, that brings us to the state budget, which again is not a city issue, but affects the schools here. And since the mayor brought it up, let's get an update from you on the budget. While the three of us were at the State of the City speech today, you were watching the legislature try and work through a budget deal. What's the status at this point?
Trying to work through a budget deal. As we've reported throughout the week, a budget deal came out midweek. The governor and legislative Republicans worked it out. When they tried to bring it to the floor this morning, they started getting a lot of pushback from Republicans, which surprised a lot of people. Obviously, Democrats are going to push back against it. Some of the more moderate Republicans are pushing back against it, and even some of the more conservative Republicans are really pushing back against it. As we sit here late in the afternoon now, we still haven't had a floor session on the budget. There are amendments potentially flying back and forth, but we haven't seen anything solid happen. A lot of members talking about, okay, I got this put back in, we got that taken out of the budget, but until the bill passes and we see actual amendments hit, we won't know if those are hollow promises, hopes, or anything like that. It's very, very fluid as we sit here right now. Or maybe it's not that fluid, it's not moving at all, but the situation is pretty tense right now in the Capitol.
It doesn't seem like Governor Ducey and the legislative leaders expected to run into the sort of opposition to, especially the cuts to education, that they, there was a pretty immediate outcry. And we just heard the applause for the mayor's line in his speech in front of a fairly Republican crowd at the Metro Chamber. There were a lot of Republican business people there who I think that was probably the biggest applause line of the day.
And that's something we've heard a lot from the chambers, be it the Arizona Chamber, the Tucson Chamber. Education is important, be it K-12 or higher ed, and higher ed took a big hit in this new budget, up to $104 million from the governor's proposed $77 million cut. So there was a lot of pushback pretty quickly. Now granted, the chambers have been a little more quiet in the last few days since this new budget has come out, but at the same time there has been some quiet pushback kind of behind the scenes.
After the mayor spoke, actually the president of the Tucson Metro Chamber, in kind of his closing remarks, told everybody who was listening to the speech, which was almost 1,000 people, yeah, you need to say what you think to your lawmakers about education funding cuts. So we're directly hearing that from people in Tucson, from the people in charge of the business community. I do want to switch to another issue, and that is veterans' homelessness. Dylan, we have been hearing that the city had a goal to end veterans' homelessness by 2015. Today in the speech, I think the language changed a little bit to ending it by the end of 2015. Did you notice that? Is that just me reading too much into it?
It may be a little bit of parsing of language on our part to pick on that, but really, that's a very lofty and really impossible goal. There are so many homeless people who are transient. They are here for a short period of time, and more people show up, some people leave. So trying to even end homelessness amongst a very specific part of the community, to say that we're going to house everyone who's been a veteran, is something that is, I don't know if that's, something that you can say we've given every last person a place to live ever.
Well, yeah, it's hard to quantify,
exactly,
regardless of how well.
And even our count of how many people who are in Tucson who are homeless is really just sort of an estimate.
So sticking with homelessness and straying a little bit away from the State of the City speech, another big issue in Tucson is the homeless camp downtown. It's being called Safe Park. There's people camped out on sidewalks and staying in some wooden boxes, and it's being called a freedom of speech protest against the way homelessness is treated. Becky, there were some changes in this case. Dylan gave us an update last week. What happened this week?
So this week, the city decided that they are going to start the process of creating a new ordinance. It takes 90 days to create a new city ordinance, but they looked at several cities that have urban camping ordinances, and they picked Denver as a model. So they're going to move forward with the Denver model and try and define what camping means and where you can do it, and they hope that that means you won't be able to camp on sidewalks in downtown Tucson. They also still have ongoing legal challenges, so coming up on Tuesday there's going to be a hearing and a reconsideration on their U.S. District Court case, and they have an appeals case moving forward.
And the council decided to try and move people who are camping or living without shelter on the sidewalks to somewhere else in town. Do we have clarity on what that means or where they'll go?
So there's a newish Salvation Army shelter opening that said they can take a lot of these people. But for some of these people, it's not really the point. They want to be able to occupy public lands, and it's part of their protest to be in public parks. So whether they will go to this nonprofit shelter is a question that we'll have to watch.
And the organizer of this protest, his name is John McClain, and we just heard late this week that he's been arrested. I'm not sure if he's still in jail or not, but it was an arrest on drug charges. What does that potentially mean for the encampment? Do we have any idea yet?
I think we're waiting to see. So John McClain, the organizer, he is the one that's holding this protest together, I feel like, at times. And so we're waiting to see whether his followers will stick with it, or if he is going to be released from jail soon, then he'll quickly be back to his role as organizer.
And we should note that other people at this protest site were also cited on drug charges, and it was an undercover operation with Tucson police, so it wasn't just John McClain. I do want to, you touched on the issue of city revenue and how the city makes its budget work. So I do want to cut to another clip of the mayor's address where he talks about the need to annex more parts from unincorporated Pima County into the city of Tucson.
An opportunity I've talked about before is annexation, bringing back more of the tens of millions in state-shared revenue we lose each year by failing to annex or incorporate. The city of Tucson completed 7 annexations last year, estimated to bring more than $39 million back to our community over the next 10 years. Part of that land was by the airport, giving us the ability to offer city incentives to businesses that want to develop the land for manufacturing and logistics, prime industrial properties at the center of our logistics hub.
Dylan, we have some more indications about what it means to businesses, but I'm wondering if you can explain financially, what does it mean for, what does an annexation project do for the city's budget?
Makes it go up.
How?
A lot of tax money goes to the state and then is returned back to cities and towns. And if they're not in an incorporated area, you don't get as much money back. So basically, Pima County, because we have so many people who live in unincorporated areas who don't live in Tucson or in Miranda or in Oro Valley, our money goes to Phoenix and doesn't really come back. And if more people are inside municipalities, we will get more of that tax money back here in Pima County to spend on the things that we think it should be spent on rather than things that the legislature wants to spend on.
Becky, oh, go ahead.
The particular project he's talking about near the airport is this major distribution center retailer, Home Goods, wants to bring to Tucson. So if they can attract a major project like that, they definitely want it to be within city limits so that they can get the tax revenue that would come with a big project like that.
And the theme of this speech, we're wrapping up in our last couple minutes of the show, last 1 minute. The theme was opportunity. And we saw in previous years, he talked about public-private partnerships and then, of course, the 5 Ts last year. Becky, what did you think about the theme opportunity in this speech?
It seems like the mayor is taking several of the speeches from his past years and kind of mashing them together. He wants people to know that Tucson's making progress, and he also called on people in several different ways to work together to find solutions to problems. He wants to be able to realize Tucson's potential.
And Dylan, we have 30 seconds left now. This was, the mayor is up for re-election this year. He's one of the 4 people up for re-election this year. Was this a campaign speech?
It wasn't overtly a campaign speech, but he was, trying to brag a little bit about what he and his partners on the city council have been doing, in front of an audience that is business-oriented, and with a lot of Republicans, you can't really get up and give a complete stump speech.
And we should note he is running for re-election. That's it for our show this week, but for more on this week's news, including stories that aired on NPR 89.1, go to our website. There you can also watch the full video of the mayor's State of the City speech. Now, Arizona Week features an in-depth look at the Common Core curriculum standards and an analysis of the proposed state budget as we know it so far.